How long does a cold case have to be before it's declared unsolvable? A year, a decade, a century? What if I told you about a crime that spanned nearly 800 years? This isn't a story of a missing person, but of a missing kingdom. It's the tale of an investigation conducted not by detectives, but by generations of kings and crusaders, all seeking to solve the original sin of their nation's birth, the theft of an entire country. And the central mystery is not who did it, but whether a land once taken can ever truly be reclaimed. The crime scene is the Iberian Peninsula. The year is 711. The victim is the Visigothic kingdom, a Christian realm that had ruled for 3 centuries, a successor state to the mighty Roman Empire. But it was a kingdom rotting from within, torn apart by civil war and internal betrayals. Its rulers were blind to the storm gathering just across the narrow strait of water to the south, a storm that was about to wash them from the pages of history in a single, devastating flood. The initial invasion was shockingly swift. A Berber general, Tariq ibn Ziyad, leading an army of the Umayyad Caliphate, landed at a site that would later bear his name, Jabal Tariq, or the Mountain of Tariq, Gibraltar. At the Battle of Guadalete, the Visigothic army, led by their king Roderick, was not just defeated, but utterly annihilated. The king vanished in the fray, his kingdom decapitated in a single, fatal blow. The door to Iberia had been kicked wide open. What followed was less a war and more a collapse. City after city, Cordoba, Toledo, Seville, fell with bewildering speed. Within a few short years, the invaders controlled almost the entire peninsula. The Visigothic kingdom was dead. In its place, a new, vibrant, and powerful Islamic state was born, Al-Andalus. The crime was complete. The evidence was everywhere, in the new mosques rising from the foundations of old churches, and in a new language echoing in the ancient Roman streets. The investigation began almost immediately, not in a grand headquarters, but in a hidden corner of the northern mountains. The first detective was a Visigothic nobleman named Pelagius. In the mountains of Asturias, he gathered a small band of holdouts, a ghost of the vanquished kingdom. In 722, at a place called Covadonga, they ambushed a much larger Muslim force. It was a tiny, insignificant skirmish in the grand scheme of things, but it was a crucial first clue. The case was not cold. The spirit of resistance was alive. From this spark, the kingdom of Asturias was born, a tiny Christian foothold clinging to the northern coast. For centuries, this was the headquarters of the investigation. The work was slow, dangerous, and often seemed hopeless. They would push south, taking a town, only to be driven back by the overwhelming power of Al-Andalus. This was a war fought over generations, a grim inheritance passed from father to son, a blood feud against an entire civilization. The detectives of this long investigation were the Christian kingdoms that slowly emerged: Leon, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and later, Portugal. They were often as much at war with each other as they were with their southern enemy. This internal rivalry was the greatest challenge to solving the case. The evidence of their stolen birthright lay before them, but their own petty squabbles and ambitions constantly threatened to derail the entire 800-year-long pursuit of justice. Meanwhile, the power they faced was dazzling. The Caliphate of Cordoba, the heart of Al-Andalus, became the most advanced society in Europe. Its capital, Cordoba, was a city of libraries, universities, and public baths at a time when much of Christian Europe was mired in darkness. It was a center of science, mathematics, and philosophy. The Christian kingdoms of the north were, by comparison, poor, rustic, and seemingly insignificant. To fuel their centuries-long struggle, the investigators needed more than just a claim. They needed a powerful symbol, a piece of evidence that was almost supernatural. In the 9th century, they found it. A hermit was said to have been guided by a star to a forgotten field, where he discovered a Roman-era tomb. It was declared to be the final resting place of St. James the Apostle, one of Jesus' own disciples. The discovery of the tomb of Santiago de Compostela was a pivotal moment. James was transformed into Santiago Matamoros, St. James the Moor Slayer. He became the patron saint of the Reconquista, a mystical warrior who was said to appear on battlefields, turning the tide with a heavenly sword. This was no longer just a war for land, it was a holy crusade, a divinely sanctioned mission to reclaim a sacred Christian birthright. But the path to justice was never straight. In the late 10th century, the investigation suffered a devastating setback. A brilliant and ruthless military ruler rose in Cordoba, Almanzor the Victorious. For over 2 decades, he waged a campaign of terror against the north. He launched more than 50 raids, sacking cities like Barcelona, León, and even the holy sanctuary of Santiago de Compostela itself. Almanzor's campaigns nearly closed the case for good. He brought the Christian kingdoms to their knees, forcing them to pay humiliating tribute. He burned the sanctuary of Santiago to the ground, though he spared the tomb itself. It seemed as though the dream of Reconquest was dead, a fool's errand that had ended in fire and ruin. The darkness was closing in, and the original crime seemed destined to become a permanent state of being. But then a breakthrough. After the death of Almanzor, the powerful Caliphate of Cordoba, much like the Visigothic kingdom before it, collapsed from within. It shattered into dozens of smaller, competing Islamic kingdoms called taifas. This fragmentation was the opening the Christian investigators had been waiting for. The once monolithic enemy was now a fractured collection of rivals, ripe to be played against one another. This new era produced one of the most enigmatic figures of the entire investigation, Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, better known as El Cid. He was the ultimate wildcard, a Castilian nobleman and brilliant military commander who was exiled by his own king. He became a mercenary, a sword for hire, fighting for both Christian and Muslim rulers. His career showed the complex, often contradictory nature of the Reconquista, where lines of loyalty and faith were often blurred by ambition and survival. El Cid eventually carved out his own kingdom by conquering the Taifa of Valencia, proving that a determined Christian warlord could now dominate a major Islamic city. Though he was a rogue element, his personal success became a powerful symbol. He was a flawed hero for a brutal age, a man who demonstrated that the power dynamic on the peninsula was fundamentally shifting. The momentum was slowly but surely changing sides. The feuding Taifa kingdoms, terrified of the growing Christian strength, sought help from abroad. This led to 2 new waves of invasion from North Africa, first by the Almoravids and then by the Almohads. These were fundamentalist empires who saw the high culture of Al-Andalus as decadent. They temporarily reunited Muslim Spain and launched fierce jihads against the north, once again stalling the Reconquista. The Almohad threat in particular was severe. They were powerful, fanatical, and they inflicted a series of crushing defeats on the Christian kingdoms. This new existential threat forced the Christian rulers to do something they had long resisted: truly unite. They began to see that their petty rivalries would lead to their mutual destruction. The time for a joint operation, a final, decisive move to crack the case, was at hand. The Pope in Rome declared the coming conflict a crusade, promising spiritual rewards for any who fought. Knights from across Europe answered the call, marching to Spain to join the fight. The Christian kings of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre put aside their disputes and assembled a massive, combined army. The stage was set for a single battle that would determine the fate of the entire 800-year investigation. The breakthrough moment came in the summer of 1212, on a hot, dusty plain in southern Spain known as Las Navas de Tolosa. The combined Christian army faced the massive Almohad host in a battle for the soul of the peninsula. Early in the fight, the Christian lines began to buckle under the immense pressure. It seemed as though disaster was imminent. But then, in a legendary moment of resolve, King Alfonso VII of Castile, along with the other kings, led a desperate, all-or-nothing charge. They smashed through the enemy lines, breaking the Almohad formation and causing a catastrophic rout. The victory was absolute and overwhelming. The professional army of the Almohad Empire was shattered in a single day. The back of Muslim military power in Iberia was broken forever. The aftermath of Las Navas de Tolosa was a cascade of Christian victories. The case had been blown wide open, and now the evidence was being collected at a breathtaking pace. The great cities of Al-Andalus, once untouchable, began to fall one by one. Cordoba, the former heart of the Caliphate, was captured in 1236. Valencia fell in 1238. and Seville, the greatest city of the Almohads, was taken in 1248. Within a few decades, the entire political and demographic map of the peninsula was redrawn. Hundreds of thousands of Muslim inhabitants fled south or to North Africa. Christian settlers, encouraged by the kings, moved down from the north to repopulate the conquered lands, a process known as the repoblacion. The investigation was nearing its end, but one final, stubborn piece of the puzzle remained. By the late 13th century, Al-Andalus had been reduced to a single client state in the far south, the Emirate of Granada. It survived for over 2 more centuries, clinging to the mountainous terrain and paying tribute to the powerful Christian kingdom of Castile. It was a place of legendary beauty, a final repository of a sophisticated and dying culture, its jewel being the magnificent Alhambra Palace. For a time, it seemed this final piece of the puzzle would be left alone. The Christian kingdoms were often distracted by their own internal wars and the Black Death. Granada persisted, a ghost of a lost world, a final witness to the original crime. But its existence was a constant reminder that the case was not yet fully closed, that the final verdict had not yet been delivered. The final act began with a marriage. In 1469, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand I of Aragon united their 2 powerful kingdoms. This union created a new, formidable entity, the Kingdom of Spain. These 2 monarchs, known as the Catholic monarchs, were pious, ruthless, and determined to complete the Reconquista once and for all. They would be the lead prosecutors in the final trial. In 1482, Ferdinand and Isabella launched the final war against Granada. It was not a single campaign, but a brutal 10-year slog. They systematically captured the towns and fortresses around the city, slowly strangling the last emirate. They brought the latest European siege cannons and military techniques to bear, leaving nothing to chance. This was the final, bloody culmination of centuries of conflict. The final siege of the city of Granada began in 1491. Trapped within the walls was the last Nasrid emir, Mohammed Xii, known to the Spanish as Boat. Facing starvation and with no hope of rescue, he finally entered into negotiations to surrender the city. The long, bloody, 781-year-long investigation was over. The verdict was delivered on January 2, 1492. Boabdil officially handed over the keys of the city to Ferdinand and Isabella. The silver cross of the Crusade and the banners of Castile and Aragon were raised over the highest tower of the Alhambra. As Boabdil rode away into exile, he is said to have looked back at his lost city and wept. The crime, from the perspective of the victors, was finally solved. But the legacy of this verdict was immediate, and it was dark. Just 3 months after the fall of Granada, the Catholic monarchs issued the Alhambra Decree, ordering all Jews in Spain to either convert to Catholicism or be expelled from the kingdom. A few years later, Muslims were given the same ultimatum. The new Spain would be a unified, exclusively Catholic state, enforced by the terrifying Spanish Inquisition. The methods used to solve the crime had created a new one. The diverse, multi-confessional society of medieval Iberia, for all its conflicts, was destroyed. An era of religious tolerance, however imperfect, was replaced by one of brutal enforcement and ethnic cleansing. The end of the Reconquista was not a moment of pure triumph, but one stained by a new and terrible intolerance. Yet the energy of 1492 was explosive. The very same year that Granada fell, Ferdinand and Isabella, flush with victory and confidence, agreed to finance the mad scheme of a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus. The militant, crusading spirit that had been forged over 8 centuries of the Reconquista did not simply vanish. It was redirected outward across the Atlantic, launching an age of Spanish exploration and global empire. The legacy is etched into the very soul of Spain and Portugal. It is in the grand cathedrals built on the sites of former mosques, in the thousands of Arabic words embedded in the Spanish language, and in the stunning Islamic architecture of the Alhambra and the Mezquita of Cordoba. The peninsula is a crime scene where the ghosts of all parties, Visigoth, Berber, Arab, Jew, and Castilian, still linger. The Reconquista shaped a national identity built on militant Catholicism and a sense of divine destiny. This identity would fuel the Spanish Empire for centuries, for both good and it created a culture where faith and fatherland were inextricably linked, a powerful and often dangerous combination that would echo down through Spanish history, even into the Civil War of the 20th century. So was it truly a reconquest, or was it simply a conquest like any other in human history? The people who lost in 1492 were not the same people who had conquered the land in 711. They had been there for nearly 800 years, a span of time longer than many nations have existed. The very idea of reclaiming something after 30 generations is a profoundly mysterious and troubling concept. In the end, the Reconquista leaves us with a chilling question that hangs over all of history. Who gets to write the definition of a crime? In this epic, centuries-long case, the verdict was delivered by the sword, and history was written by the victors. But the ghosts of Al-Andalus remain, whispering a different story, a reminder that every solved case leaves behind unanswered questions, and that the roots of a nation can be found as much in what was lost as in what was won.